Can you find the middle path? You only walk one side of the road. Feel my heart, feel it racing. Take it where the wild river flows. Rip it out, step on it, the pain will fade, but the memory will linger. You cannot find the middle path. You only walk one side of the road. Thought I knew all the answers, but I have to learn the hard way. Looked you in the eyes this morning, and I swear I saw the sun. I saw the sun go down. You cannot find the middle path if you only walk one side of the road. You cannot find the middle path if you only walk one side of the road. I walk the fine line between a better and a broken man. I walk this lonely road and I ask myself, when will I feel so alive again?
Hi all. Good to be here on the live stream. We're streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. I'm Anthony and we're live at the school here in Belgium. Today we have a very special guest because he's a good friend of mine and he's a very knowledgeable person about guitar in general, but we're specifically going to talk about playing blues rhythm guitar. And I'll be speaking about that with Mark Turko in Chicago during guitar-related events, and we'll be talking about fun and rewarding ways to improve your playing, especially the blues rhythm playing, that is. And Mark is the principal instructor and gives guitar lessons in New Haven at his Solution Music Studio near New York City. So welcome, Mark, and also if you're tuning in with us, let us know where you're tuning in from, wherever that's in the world. Hey Mark, what's up?
Hi Anthony, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. All right.
Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. So I'm looking forward to chatting about your expert in the area of rhythm playing.
I'm ready.
All right, that's
I'm
cool.
ready.
All right, you were born ready, right? So it's a very cool topic we'll be talking about, and I'm very excited about this because, like, making your blues rhythm playing more fun and interesting is actually one of my favorite topics of all time to be talking about with students. And also it's a rewarding topic because it sort of also has a bad name. People think about blues rhythm playing as being same old boring chords. And most people want to play lead and always focus on playing scales up and down, but it can be very rewarding, as you know, to get mileage from your rhythm playing as well. And it's of course very important to know how to best approach it. And I have my ways personally to break my students out of that pattern where they're like, well, rhythm playing, how do I approach it? And then we will cover that if we have time for this during the live stream. I'm happy to share my personal recommendations that I use with students about this topic. But I'm curious, of course, about your approaches, Mark. So what do you do with students to make their blues rhythm playing more fun and interesting? Any exercises or practices you want to share with us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing that I want to have them do is always play to a backing track. It's much more interesting than just playing along to just a plain click or a metronome. I mean, there's a time and a place for that. But if you're beyond being able to play in time, to be able to play along to a backing track and hear yourself in a simulated ensemble, that in itself is actually more rewarding, especially if you have the opportunity where you can really give it some volume. So if you don't have volume restrictions, if you could really crank it up and turn your amp up a little bit, I mean, I don't know about you, but that's fun. I mean, that's the closest thing to being in a live band as you can get, if you could really get some good volume out of it. So that's the first thing, if it's possible. The second thing I like to do is have them challenge themselves using chord inversions. Just don't do the same thing all the time, every single time. I mean, even for me, that would be boring. That's boring. If you know how to do it and you keep doing it over and over and over again, I mean, that's boring. So you could always challenge yourself with different chord inversions. You could practice not always playing on the one of the measure. You could wait for the one to happen and then come in. If you don't know what that is, it's basically just wait a minute, wait a second for it to happen, and then you can come in. You'd be very, very, very surprised how great that sounds. So also the other thing too is don't try to play continuously throughout the whole measure. Create some spaces in between your strums. Nobody said that you have to barrel right through, keeping your strumming hand going the whole entire time until it's time for the chord change. Another thing I like to suggest as well is accenting on the upbeats. So when you don't play continuously through a whole measure and you do leave some space, you can actually put some accents on the upstrokes as well. In addition to that, if they know scales too, you could always put some licks or fills in between your chord changes, some short little single note melody lines that just kind of tie the two chords together. So there's a lot to do to keep it very interesting.
Oh, here I am. Okay, cool, Mark, for sharing that. And one thing that I want to pick up on what you told about using the in between the measures when you're playing on the upbeat. In blues playing, it can be really cool to go in this direction for people who are playing already a bit of like simple shuffle rhythm, simple blues riffs. One thing you can do is to actually also use upstrokes in between the beats like this. And this is also something that can put your rhythm playing in the blues a bit further, that can develop it more if you're only used to playing this. Because that can get really boring really soon. And if you listen to the blues masters like Robert Johnson, for instance, like he's his rhythmic feel. There's like 3 guitar parts playing all at the same time, and it's very rhythmically developed, and it's very cool to listen to. But if you want to use a little bit of this and the most basic riffs and add this playing on the upbeat, that is here an example of what you can use. Just use an up strum on the open strings, and a lot of blues players have adapted this approach to create more fun and interesting ways to develop these standard blues riffs. And there's of course more we can talk about, but I'm very interested about what your approaches are. And of course, if there are any questions from people who are live with us here now, you can just put them in the chat if you're tuning in during this live stream on YouTube or Facebook. Don't hold back to get any questions to Mark about rhythm playing in general. And one thing I've noticed as a teacher myself is how hard it can be at first to develop like solid rhythm skills. And a lot of people kind of skim over practicing rhythm because of this, because it's difficult to get into, they don't know how to approach it, or because, like we just mentioned, they wrongfully think it is boring. But it's so crucial to learn to develop great rhythm skills, because if you ever want to join a band, or you want to have, just like you described, Mark, the good skills to play with backing tracks, even if this is your goal, to play with the simulate the simulation of the band with backing tracks, then you need to of course develop those skills, and otherwise no one will ever want to play with you. So I'm curious, what are your approaches to get people to improve their rhythm skills better and faster? For example, like when someone isn't skilled at rhythm at all, it's easy, of course, to discard this as well, he or she isn't rhythmically talented, and most people tell all kinds of stories about themselves, like, I don't have any talent for rhythm. And I certainly wasn't born with the talent for rhythm myself. I had to work quite hard on it. But what is behind this, in my opinion, superficial curtain of talent? Is there a way to develop your rhythm better if you aren't talented?
Absolutely. My natural rhythm talent never existed until I developed it. You know what I mean? First things first. So what you mentioned before, don't avoid practicing it. It may not be fun at first, but don't avoid it. You know, that's for sure. You know, going back to some of the strategies and tactics I talked about earlier, if you, you know, simply cycle through these different things that I had mentioned, chord inversions and, you know, playing on the upbeats and stuff like that, you know, play a whole chord progression, just focusing on one element, and then play a whole nother chord progression, focusing on a different element. And then, you know, another chord progression, you just focus on your first inversion chords. Your next one, you focus on your second inversion chords. And then when you're fluent with that, then you can just kind of start mixing and matching. And when you start mixing and matching, that is actually when you become a good rhythm player, because on command, you can easily do all these things. All right. So you're actually practicing these things. And once you start putting them into practice, so to speak, you know, that's when you start sounding like a good rhythm player. But you can't dodge it. You can't avoid it. Now, that's for maybe people who know how to already have some type of rhythm. For those who think they're totally rhythmically challenged, you know, for those who really can't play in time well at all yet, the first thing that you need to do is you need to set the internal clock. You need to be able to have an internal metronome going the whole time. So an easy way to do that is you just listen to a metronome and you tap your foot. Don't even put your guitar in your hand. Just tap your foot along to it. You could do it at varying tempos. It sounds like it's so elementary, but you'd be surprised how many people can't do it right immediately because they never really tried. Then the next thing that you could do is tap your foot along to a metronome and turn the volume on and off. And see, keep tapping your foot and see when you turn the volume back on, is your foot still tapping along with the metronome? Did you stray from the tempo at all? You know? So that's an exercise that I like to give my students as well. Another thing for people who feel as though that they can't play rhythm well is I have them say it. And I have a saying at the school that my school, if you can say it, you can play it. And what it does is by vocalizing, let's just say we're talking about a simple, super simple pattern, down, 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 up, down, something super, super, super easy, but students have a hard time with it and they're starting out. If they say it long enough, it's almost automatic that they could pick their guitar up and do it. I usually have them fake strumming as they're saying it. But then once they get the strumming going, once they get the guitar in their hand, it's not a problem at all. So it's more like you need to internalize the rhythm first before you try to just execute it, One other thing that's pretty common for people who say that they're not any good at rhythm is because they don't have the ability to keep the rhythm going. It takes them a while to change chords. So they'll stop and they'll break the continuity of the rhythm. And we don't want to do that. We want to seamlessly go from one chord to the next. Well, nobody said that you have to actually strum right up to the very last second until it changes. Sometimes you can actually cut your, take a stroke or two off to make sure that you play the next chord at the proper time. So, being on time is much more important than finishing the whatever rhythm pattern that you happen to be playing, but then be late for the next chord. That's something that we definitely don't want to do. That's definitely, we don't want to do at all. So, and the one other thing too that I noticed for people who say that they don't play rhythm well, they actually try to play things that are very, very complex immediately. Keeping something very simple, playing in the pocket, just sitting in with the other instruments is actually something that's not that hard to do. And when you really break it down, most pros do fairly simple things most of the time, all right? Except they just might throw an accent here or there in. So if you can get that simple thing down, adding an accent or a little embellishment actually becomes easier after that. So slow down, keep it simple, make sure that you actually hit the next chord progression when you're supposed to, set your internal clock. Those are basically the highlights of the things that I like to do. How about you, Anthony? What do you like to do?
Yeah, and thank you, Mark, for sharing this. There are a lot of good ideas and actually ideas that I also use with students over here. And especially the part where you were talking about just speaking the rhythm, saying the rhythm. I found that if you tie language to rhythm, for a lot of people it becomes more natural. It becomes easier to grasp what rhythm is and how rhythm can be felt in your body. Because if you talk, you're using syllables, and if you pick certain words with certain rhythms, how you pronounce those syllables, it becomes more easier to grasp how these rhythms should be played. Like, for instance, a lot of people have challenges with the shuffle feel, for instance, or the triplet feel, like playing triplets. And one thing that I like to do is to have one or several words that they are accustomed to it, that use, for instance, 3 syllables. And it can be anything, like what comes to mind in English now is strawberry. It's strawberry, strawberry, strawberry. So it's triplet rhythm. And in this way, they can get a feel for this triplet rhythm better than just telling them like play 3 notes per beat, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I start dancing around doing a waltz. You know what I mean? I said, you don't want to watch me dance. We have to figure out another way.
Right, it's a waltz rhythm, yeah. And these little comparisons make a huge deal in advancements. And of course, for what gets people to understand rhythm on a deeper level is for everyone, there's approaches that work well and approaches that work a bit less. But in general, yeah, speaking those of or thinking in terms of words and syllables is a huge deal when working with rhythm, and also playing those rhythms without your fretting hand, or being able to just tap rhythms in your hands or on your knee, like what you described earlier. If you can say it, you can play it. Is it right? That was your slogan, your school slogan about rhythm. So I also think if you can tap it or clap it, you can strap it to make like yeah.
There's something about creating the rhythm with some part of your body, whether it's vocally, with your feet, tapping on your knees, clapping it. I don't care what it is. You're already like internalizing the rhythm. So to have it play on the guitar after you've already done that is actually so much easier. You've already bridged the gap between something you hear and what you do with this hand. It's a big bridge too. And it seems like things click a lot quicker if you can say it, if you can clap it, if you could tap it on your knee, whatever it might be. There's something about that internalization of that rhythm. It makes it come out here so much more easier when it's time to do that. Totally.
Right. And this also ties to a thing that most people don't realize in the beginning, but rhythm is also tied a lot to coordination. If you have like problem with rhythm, it can really help to get the fundamental movements of the body practiced at first. Like, for instance, if you're having trouble as a beginner strumming certain patterns or even as an advanced guitar player, if you just break up the patterns and practice them without metronome, then you can focus on the movements. And then if you bring your foot in, because a lot of people I found have trouble tapping their foot when they're playing rhythm, or playing anything for that matter, because if you can tap your foot with rhythms, you can't tap it with lead playing as well. But if you just tap it without the rhythm and you focus only on the coordination, the movement, the big movement, so to speak, then it becomes much more manageable to see what is happening in the body. And of course, we are working then more on a technical fundament, less on the rhythm. But if you get your technical fundament right in this way, practicing without metronome at first, then it will become easier to just make the right movements and then to tie the linguistic part of it to the rhythm, like we were just mentioning. So this is great advice.
Yeah, and not only that though, I mean, and I think what you're implying though too is you're really slowing things down a lot to fully understand what's going on. And even if it's a big, long, complex rhythm, you're breaking it up into smaller parts. So you really, really, truly have time to think and understand what's going on. Let's just say there's 3 distinct sections, but it's one big, long, complex thing. And you work on one part at a time, and you do it slowly so you could really deeply understand what's happening. Once you understand truly what's going on, it's actually not hard to speed it up. It's actually pretty easy, but to have that deeper understanding and to break it down and don't use a metronome, really understand the hand motions involved and everything. And that brings up another thing, is to practice in slow motion. Make sure that your hand movements are going to do what they're supposed to do at top speed, not flailing your arm like this because we're going slow when your wrist is just supposed to be doing this. We need to practice just when we do, if the wrist is only going to be making this kind of a motion, we won't open up our elbow just because we're playing slowly. So to practice slowly, but also to practice exactly what you're supposed to play in slow motion, completely understand the mechanics of everything. Once you truly do, it actually is fairly easy to get it up to speed.
Right. And getting the rhythm in your head, as you were describing, is very easily misunderstood by a lot of people. But by listening a lot to music, this also develops. And sometimes people try to learn a complex instrument like the guitar, and they want to get in a better rhythmic shape, so to speak, but they don't listen to the songs they want to play. So that's a huge mistake. And the more you listen to the rhythms and you try to really get a feel or get a focused feel when you listen to music, this also helps a lot. And one thing you mentioned about using the metronome, of course, this is a great idea as well. All the ideas you mentioned, practices like to turn off the volume of the metronome, keep tapping and then turn it back on, is just great advice to show how far you are getting with really locking with the rhythm. And this is most of the time an eye-opener for people. And most of the time they also don't want to, stare that in the eye, and they're trying to get into complex lead playing more than developing the rhythm. But it's very important to, as you said, focus on the daily routine, on your rhythm. And sometimes it's a bit like if people approach it from the idea, well, I need to get my rhythm playing, in shape. Sometimes it feels like they don't put their heart into it. And it can be a bit tedious. I personally think like if you're practicing all the time with a metronome or in slow motion, it becomes really tedious and you need a lot of discipline. But one idea to make it more fun and rewarding that I really like to do in my own practicing and with students is to, like you stated, practice with a backing track, but one without any chords or even bass parts, like just drum tracks. Like you can find a lot of them on YouTube if you search for drum track 100 BPM, drum track shuffle rhythm 80 BPM. And then you get a sense of you're just playing with the drum beat, and it can be really fun and rewarding to have that idea of just creating simple riffs or playing existing riffs. It can be riffs played on one string, with just one finger, but trying to get those very first riffs in drum can be really cool and rewarding.
Yeah, I agree. And especially when you do strip it down just to drums only, there's less distraction as to other things that are going on. You don't have to follow any form of any song. You could just stay on one chord and just vamp on it and actually truly, really, really, really focus on just the rhythm. You don't have to worry about changing chords at all. It gives you the opportunity to really listen to the drummer because there isn't anything else to listen to, and you could start picking up on things what the drummer's doing. If he's hitting, an accent on an upbeat at the same point in a drum beat, you could start matching that accent too, or let him do it and then call and response, do it right after him. You know what I mean? There's so many more things that you could really go deep just with a single drum track.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. Syncing with the drum is something you need to learn by doing such exercise, because we can't always play with a live drummer. Well, most of us can't.
Yeah.
So these are great exercise to get that rhythm more in sync, an essential exercise pretty much, because a lot of people, like I said before, they're really excited about playing lead parts, but most people, what they need is a lot more focus on the rhythm playing. And what I found is that, like, when I have, like, for instance, an hour to practice, if I do like 20 minutes of rhythm practice and playing with the drum groove, trying out certain riffs over a drum groove, my playing really grows exponentially. And that's also something that I stress with students, that it's not only about who's the fastest or who can play the most complex scales. This is also fun, but the rhythms is like one of the most fundamental things to learn as a musician, to develop your rhythm playing. And if people have, like, if there are people here live with us on the chat, or you're watching this on YouTube later on, then if you have any trouble with playing shuffle rhythms, this same idea about the linguistic part of it can help you. Also, if you put it in Morse code, like in the shuffle rhythm, a lot of people play it in the beginning as a beginner the other way around, like instead of playing this, they play like, and this is okay, of course, for a beginner. Nobody is making fun of this. It's like everyone had to start at the early stages. But just by saying out the Morse code of this rhythm, which is actually just a long beep and a short beep, it's like long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, is also something that helps with developing these fundamental feels for the rhythm. Cool, thanks, Mark, for your ideas on this. And let's talk about Stevie Ray Vaughan for a moment, because, like, his rhythm playing was like impeccable. Like, lots of people want to get into his style of playing, where he's just hitting all the strings really hard while muting the strings with his fretting hand. I think Stevie Ray Vaughan's rhythm playing is like a cathedral. Like, it's like Led Zeppelin. A lot of people play cover songs in a cover band of Led Zeppelin, but there's only one Led Zeppelin. I'm not saying that you shouldn't study these bands or these artists, but it's really, really impeccable what these guys are playing, and really personal for them as well. But do you have, like, any exercises or practice you want to share? Because many people want to get into the style, and it's not to say that you shouldn't get in. I think you should eventually, if you want to get into blues playing, rock playing. These are great ideas to develop, where the fretting hand is just hitting all of the strings while you're muting here with the left hand. So I'm curious if you have any ideas or practices about developing this, Mark.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, without even concerning yourself with whatever actual rhythm you actually need to play, you actually need to be able to quickly change between the muted strings and chords that you actually want to be playing. So if you could just simply just go back and forth between muting your strings, playing a chord, muting your strings, playing a chord, ideally get to the point where a downstroke is a chord sound and the upstroke is a muted string, and just up and down, up and down, up and down strumming, and back and forth between a muted chord and muted strings and a chord is really the fundamental skill that you want to get. All right, so that's sort of like the foundation, as far as I'm concerned, that you need to have. You don't want to build your house on sand. We need a nice, strong foundation. Then once you have that down, all right, what I would suggest that my students would do is I would have them actually figure out the rhythm for the right hand only. And I would have them play that, not even be concerned with which chord or what chords I'm supposed to be playing together, or anything like that. Have them get that down, learn the right hand in isolation. Then after you have that down, then we would start working on what is the rhythm, is there chord changes involved, all right? And when, like I mentioned before, slow down, play it in slow motion, and then at that point, slow down, play it in slow motion, you are putting multiple chords together if there's multiple chords. But you kind of need to know how to play each component in isolation and understand what you need to do exactly, and then put everything together. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's complex, so it needs to be broken down into little tiny parts.
Right. I love that advice. Like complexity, if you find anything complex, not only with rhythm playing or technique, which we're talking about now, but if you've come across like a technical piece of music, if you break it into really small pieces, then it becomes much more manageable, and you can really master anything if you work at it in isolation. That's great advice. Thank you, Mark. And also, for the people who really want to get into this style of playing, what I found for myself, it's a lot of hard work, but it's really rewarding once you get. So for the Stevie Ray Vaughan playing and this kind of stuff, of course, a lot of players have used this in their own playing. He's not the only one who does this. But if you just put your finger on the one string you want to fret, and then you mute all of the other strings, for instance, here I'm playing the 5th string, and then my index finger is just muting with the tip of my finger the 6th string, and then also I'm muting with the bottom side of my index finger all other strings from the D to the high E string, and then you just go with, like we were talking about, go at it in isolation, just one motion at a time. And then at first you will find yourself, having strings that are ringing out, or it's still sloppy, and then you try it again, and then you uncover your mistakes in this part. But if you can just do this, then your whole playing will become more tighter in this regard, because you will actually free up your right hand if you're able to do this. And then you can bring in other other note, but don't try at first to go for because otherwise you will be in for a serious surprise, because it's a really technical developed thing to mute all of the strings you don't want. You aren't fretting, so take it one string at a time, isolate like Mark was saying, and this will get you a lot of mileage from this playing style. All right, cool, Mark, thanks. So is there anything else you want to share with people? The number one thing, maybe like if they want to develop rock solid rhythm playing skills that you haven't mentioned yet?
Nothing really that I haven't mentioned, but I don't think I could say it enough for someone who's first starting out. You want to really be able to set that internal clock, really work with the metronome, tapping the foot, turn it on, turn it off, really get an understanding of what a steady pulse is when it comes to a rhythm. So you really want to work on that. Most people have never done that before, and it's not that hard. Even if it's a little weird at first, it doesn't take that long for it to click. And then the cool thing about that is once it clicks, you're never going to have to work on it again. It's always going to be there for the rest of your life. It's crossing this invisible line. Once you can feel a pulse internally, then that's not a problem. And the other major thing, biggest takeaway after you have your internal clock set, is that basically slow down, break it into smaller parts, and practice in slow motion. Make sure you're trying to keep your motions the same way as if you're going to be playing it up to speed. No mountain is too big to climb if you just do it one step at a time. It really, it's that, and even now, several years ago, I played in this R&B, it's like 70s disco kind of band, and I had to learn one of these rhythms that was with one of the songs, and it was very complex, and it may have been the hardest rhythm I ever had to play in my life, and I had to play it right, otherwise it would sound like I was cheating. I couldn't fake that one, I mean, I sat there for days, extremely slow. I mean, you know, once in a while I would try to speed up, and it just was, no, I'm not there yet. I need to, I need to dig a little bit deeper. You know, sometimes things just take time. You know what I mean? So there's no race. You don't win a prize if you get done faster. You know what I mean? So, you know, allow yourself the time in order to get it right, because then once you do, you know, the fulfillment will be there for the rest of your life. And that's the fun part, you know?
Cool. That's some advice. Thank you, Mark. Thanks a lot. I want to also share one other thing. Like we were talking about blues rhythm playing more fun and rewarding. Like if you're just getting started with basic blues riffs, for instance, like this, it's very cool to develop it further to a place where it's not just this riff. If you're ready for it, you can start combining it with chords, which is actually a very interesting topic. And I wrote an ebook about it. I will share the link later. It's a free ebook you can download at my site, where you can actually learn to phrase more with chords, because this playing style is also referred to often as chord phrasing. Then you can do like these things. So for people just getting started with simple rhythms, this is something very fun and rewarding. And I'll share the link to this ebook later on, where you can find like the chord shapes you can experiment with and the riffs, and you can tie all of this playing together if you want. And I want to thank you, Mark, a lot for being here with us today and sharing your knowledge with us, and also for everyone who's here with us live. Thank you for being here. If you want to check more about Mark and want to learn more about his rhythm advice, he has a Facebook page, and you can find it through the link here, facebook.com/rhythm guitar lessons. And the ebook that I just mentioned, you will find it on my website, bestbluesguitarlessonsonline.com/blues rhythm guitar. So there you have all of the examples, the chords and the riffs, and it's a free download, so you can get it for free on the website. So again, thank you everyone who was here today with us. Thank you, Mark, for your advice, and I would say take care then.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for everything. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Thanks. Great. Take care.